Buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning. It's Tuesday. Tapioca Tuesday. No. Tacos. Tempura Tuesday. I don't know. Something to do with food. How about that? It's just a beautiful Tuesday morning. Little brisk outside, but not too bad. And we are ready to go for this beautiful day to jump into everything that has to do with good stuff here in the state of Alaska. We've got your weekly top three, which we're about to dive into with Brad Keithley for Alaska's for Sustainable Budgets. Unfortunately, in hour two today, we're not going to have Chris Story because he pansied out on me. No, he's got other things going on. He's I don't know. He's going to be with us on Thursday. He's always here to just mess up my schedule. That's how he is. So we're going to have to lick our own wounds today after dealing with Brad. All right. I'm just going to say he's got the knives and the rack and the torture devices, and he's going to hit us with all the hard truths. And then we're going to have to just we'll be on our own. We're limp around for a while and deal with some of that stuff. So that's today's show. I don't know. I got some other stuff that we're going to talk about, some interesting stories and more. And then tomorrow, hopefully, we will have Mike Shower and some other things to talk about. But as I said, since it's Tuesday, and that means the weekly top three, that means Brad Keithley is waiting in the wings. He's in the green room right now, hoarding all the virtual donuts. Damn him and his virtual donut. He joins us this morning. Good morning, sir. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Michael. I'm doing great. It's Halloween, which is a good day, and also it is eggnog season. So,
he got his eggnog. Are you one of those guys that's got a separate refrigerator? You go to Costco, you buy all the eggnog, and you drink it for the next 4 months after it's out of, I swear I went. Go ahead.
I've been known to take a carton or 3 or 4, but I don't take all of it.
It was sometime it must have been March or April, and I went into we've got a second refrigerator in the garage because, hey, we're a family of a million people. And I opened the refrigerator, and I looked in the back, and I'm like, what is that? And there it is, a single carton of eggnog, unopened eggnog that somebody had been bogarting in the back of the fridge for how long? I don't even know if it was any good anymore. But, that's how it is around my house. I tell you what, eggnog, oh, man. There's something, and I'll tell you right now, the best eggnog in the world, Matanuska-made eggnog. You can't get it anymore, but it was the most delicious eggnog. I have tried to find something that compares to it. Not a single brand is as good as Matanuska-made eggnog was back in the day. Definitely delicious. It is one of my major laments with the closure of the Matanuska-made dairy.
I'll agree with that. I regularly during eggnog season go through different phases. I'll start with the basic and go to Jack Daniel's, or I'll start with Jack Daniel's and go through others. But Matt Newscomb made was very good. I agree with that.
Closest to it right now is the Darigold Old Fashioned eggnog. That's about as close as you can get these days.
So you're an eggnog connoisseur.
Oh man, I got to tell you, and then of course my grandfather my grandfather passed down his recipe for a homemade eggnog. That's a whole different critter that is absolutely delicious as well. I guarantee you I'm going to make it. Keep saying I'm going to make it. I haven't made it for 3 or 4 years. This year I'm going to make it for sure. All right. Anyway, enough of the frivolous. No, actually, that's important stuff. I guess we'll get on to the frivolous stuff now, the weekly top 3. Brad, there's some doozies on here this week. I got to tell you, and my head is just spinning with some of the stuff that's going on here. So let's start off with number 1, a question. Are the Republicans in the state of Alaska giving up on the market economy, on the free market? Have they just decided to just pitch that to the curb in light of getting whatever we want? What give us your thoughts here. Let's hit this from the beginning.
So this is all about the Cook Inlet, and this is all about Cook Inlet gas and the announcements that the Republicans have made. The Dunleavy administration has made the last 2 weeks, first by the Department of Natural Resources head to reduce the royalties, change the royalties from a fixed royalty to a net profits royalty on new leases. And then last week, an announcement by Dunleavy himself that they were going to submit legislation to reduce royalties on existing leases, not on existing production, but on existing leases where there isn't any production yet, and reduce that royalty down significantly. And then to sort of pile on, the House Republican majority issuing a press release shortly after Dunleavy's press conference saying, "Oh, that's a good thing. We want to pursue that." So here's my problem with all that. In a market economy, what is supposed to happen when you have a supply shortage or an excess demand is price is supposed to operate. And price is supposed to increase. The price that willing buyers are prepared to pay to willing sellers is supposed to increase to the level necessary to provide, here's the word that the Republicans use, but they use it wrongly, to provide an incentive to the producers to produce additional product to meet the demand. Price is the leveling technique in a market economy. And it's not that it's not operating in this economy. I mean, I was back in some of these discussions in the early 2010s when we were going through this before. And it's not that that there isn't a price at which the producers would be willing to explore and produce. It's just that it's a very high price. And it's a price that the purchasers, in the case of the Cook Inlet, NSTAR, and the electric utilities, which is now Chugach, used to be Chugach and ML&P, but now it's Chugach. It's at a price that the purchasers don't want to pay, and they don't want to pay it because they're concerned that it would be a high price that would get them in trouble with their consumers and with their ratepayers, that they get pushback on it, and that consumers would look for other alternatives than the price that is being charged by the utilities, like additional conservation measures, additional insulation, additional, in the case of the heating market, or renewables in the case of the electric market. So, what the normal market would function here, but you've got the demand side, the purchase side, that doesn't want to pay the price. And so what's the Dunleavy administration doing in this situation? What are Republicans doing in this situation? They're intervening in the market. They're creating an intervention in the market to subsidize the price. And that subsidy is proposed to come in the form of reducing supply costs by reducing the level of royalty that the state would take out of production. If price was allowed to operate, a number of things might happen. But one of the things that might happen if price was allowed to operate, if the purchasers were willing to pay the price the producers wanted in order to sell, is that the price would go up and the royalties to the state would increase because the royalties under the current leases are tied to price. So if the market operated, all the state would, South Central would have higher energy costs. I grant you that. But the state as a whole would have higher royalties, would have higher revenues, would have lower deficits, and we'd have higher PFDs because the PFDs are now being cut to match the deficit. So it would all shake out that higher price would result in higher royalties, would result in lower PFD cuts. But the Dunleavy administration and the Republicans in general are intervening want to intervene in the market to avoid that happening and to subsidize, essentially, by lowering supply costs at the expense of the state, subsidize supplies into South Central, into the Anchorage market, the Cook Inlet market. And that's just, that's something you'd expect out of Democrats. Market intervention, government intervention in market function is something you would expect out of Democrats, but not something you should expect out of Republicans. I will say this. It's better. What Dunleavy's proposing is slightly better than what Parnell did back in the 2010s when he and the legislature essentially passed a bunch of credits that directly transferred money from the state into the producers. And that was more market intervention, but this is still market intervention by the Dunleavy administration, by those who on any given day will say, oh, we believe in markets, we believe in the free market, we believe in market function.
But Brad, we must do something. I mean, that's, you can, I can hear it already, but we've got to do something. Not that the market will take care of itself, not that things like that will go forward, but, we have got to do something and be seen to be doing something to make this happen. That's the thing. This is all about being seen. And some of the optimism on some of the, one of the comments in here. This is again from the James Brooks article in the Alaska Beacon talking about the governor's announcement. He says the problem isn't one of supply. Cook Inlet remains gas rich, but one of development. There are a few other producers who've been slow to drill new wells, including Hillcorp. Okay. There's gas out there, so they've got to do something. They've got to be seen doing something.
What they're really saying when you strip through all this is we've got to subsidize the Anchorage energy market, the South Central energy market. That's really what they're saying. And we're willing to do it at the expense of the remainder of the state, at the expense of reducing royalty income, and as a result, increasing PFD cuts. We're willing to do it at the remainder of the state, but we've got to subsidize the Anchorage market. I mean, if the market was allowed to operate, what would happen is the next best alternative, which is likely LNG imports, would be on the horizon. That's where we are now. And purchasers who would be purchasing the LNG imports would say, look, before we go down this road, we're willing to pay you a price that's near to what we would be paying the LNG imports, but in order to avoid the LNG imports, we want a little bit of a discount off that. That's the price we're willing to pay. And the producers would respond either yes, that's an acceptable price that will incentivize us to produce, or no, it won't. In which event we bring in a better alternative, the better alternative, the more economically efficient alternative, which is LNG. But what the Dunleavy administration and what the Parnell administration did, my problems with this go back to the Parnell administration. What they're doing is they're short-circuiting the market. They're not allowing the market to operate. They're taking, Chugach's and N-Star's intransigence in offering higher price. They're taking that as sort of a given, and they're saying, okay, well, we'll intervene in the market. We'll help you out. And we'll come in and we'll reduce the state's royalty in order to subsidize the producers. The producers are going to get the same margin, right? It's just that the state's taking the hit, or else they won't invest. The producers are all about margins. They don't really care what the price is. They're all about margins. And what the state's saying is, okay, we'll subsidize you. We'll give you the same margin by reducing your supply cost. and so you won't have to charge as much to South Central, to the consumers to incentivize you to produce. It's market failure. I mean, and the Dunleavy administration is allowing the intransigence of the purchasers to pay the price necessary to elicit the supplies that the Dunleavy administration itself admits are there. It's allowing that intransigence of the purchasers to pay the supply to control the state, to control what the state does, to set royalty levels. I mean, it's a mess. And it's a mess anytime you intervene in markets. And now we've got Republicans in the state of Alaska intervening in markets in order to create subsidies for South Central in this case.
I also think you're scooping up a tremendous amount of hopium here, thinking that somehow that because they would spend less, that somehow that would increase our PFD. I love how your optimism on that is. I mean, it's definitely verging into the hopium category, because they're going to spend every dollar. They would use that dollar on something else if they didn't spend it on that. But that's, I mean, it's true. This whole idea of intervening in the market, somehow they're smarter than market forces. That's the answer. And we see that time and time and time again. Government's always been smarter than market forces, not letting it even itself out. But somehow they'll be able to smooth out the highs and the lows. And all they end up doing is creating a lower average for everything. All right, we got to go. We're back with more. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Brad Keithley, our guest.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Brad Keithley. Whoa, Brad Keithley is our guest. And Donna asks the question that I think several people are asking themselves. Is Brad saying that Cook Inlet LNG extraction would happen without the proposed discounts, or that Alaska should just import LNG at higher prices? And I think what he's saying is one of those two things was going to happen anyway. We're looking for the one that's going to be most affordable, right? I mean, one of the two is going to happen. So which one is it going to be? But the government shouldn't be intervening to try and make one happen over the other. Is that what you're saying, Brad? Am I summating that properly?
Well, we'll never know because we're not allowing the market to operate. I mean, well, the state's just throwing in subsidies. We don't know if the amount of subsidies are right or if they're wrong or if they're too much. I mean, as we talked about on last week's show, there is existing statutory authority for DNR, which has control over state leases, oil and gas leases, for DNR to reduce royalties where the producer can demonstrate that reducing the royalty would result in additional production, would result in additional development and additional production. There's existing statutory authority on the books for DNR to do that, both with respect to new leases and with respect to existing leases, new production areas in existing leases, which is a subsidy, but at least it's a targeted subsidy. In that case, if we're going to go down the road, at least it's targeted on those where the producer demonstrates that this additional relief would result in additional development and likely additional production. What the Dunleavy administration is proposing to do is just give a blanket exception, a blanket subsidy across the board for all new leases and all new fields. I mean, what this latest announcement is all new fields inside existing leases. Give a blanket, whether the producer can demonstrate, whether the producer is right, can demonstrate that it needs the relief or not. Just give it away. So,
and it's for the life of the field. We talked about this last week, right? Because you said the answer is not just to give leases and fields without royalties, ad nauseum or forever, but instead give the lease as it is right now with the royalty, and then say, for the time being, we'll eliminate the royalty until such time as we deem that it needs to kick back in. But if they start it without the royalty, then that's it. It's the lease forever, right? That's kind of what you said last week.
Well, that's sort of where our discussion went last week. What the Dunleavy administration is proposing is, in fact, limited. I mean, they're proposing to reduce royalties for in the legislation that the governor outlined in his press release, he's proposing to reduce the royalty for 10 years. And then presumably it kicks up to some other level, although he was unclear. The discussion didn't identify what that other level is. That sort of matches what the oil tax does on the North Slope for new field discoveries in existing leases. For new field discoveries, there's a reduced tax for 10 years. Maybe it's 5 years now. They amended that, but there's a reduced tax for a given period, and then the regular tax kicks back in. So the governor is limiting it. But my point last week that sort of led to that discussion was, what if, in this exploration, they find a pica, a gas pica, or even an oil pica,
right?
A huge amount, and such that it would have been economic to produce anyway, even at the existing royalty rate. Indeed, might even generate some taxes for us. But we've given a blanket right. Release, at least for a period of time, a blanket waiver for royalty to that. Look, the market. To get back to Donna's point, the market sometimes does demand higher prices. Yes, that's what markets do, and we accept that in other situations. Now we're saying in this situation, though, we're not going to accept that.
I think Brian summates it nicely. He says, no, we're looking for a market choice. That's what we're looking for. And I would agree with that. And we shouldn't be giving away our resources. We can agree on that. We shouldn't be giving them away or, again, violating the whole market principle and allow government to continue to intervene. All right, 12 seconds here. We're going to jump back into it to Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We're ready to go. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke show.
I don't know what you mean at all. Perfect angel. That's what my mom said every day. We're ready to go. The Michael Duke Show, number 2 of the weekly top 3. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is our guest. You can find him at ak4sb.com or on Facebook or Twitter, X, whatever they're calling it these days. He was willing to argue with you on any point you want as you go through there. Brad, number 2 of the weekly top 3. And this is just, again, more... I can't even wrap my brain around it. This piece, it's more spending without the question of who pays. This is a piece from Donna Mears over Representative Donna Mears about Medicaid cuts. And there's so much wrong with this article, so much wrong with this opinion piece. But give me your thoughts on it.
We ought to switch roles. I ought to just tee this up and let you take off.
Oh my God.
About this article.
Trust me, I'm going to tear this apart in the next hour because I'm going to go through this thing line by line and just point to the absolute insanity that this article indicates. Go ahead.
Well, the headline tells it all. The headline is, and this is, as you said, a piece by Donna Mears, Representative Donna Mears, Medicaid cuts threaten the broader economy. And basically, this article says we need to restart. We've had a bunch of Medicaid cuts. It starts out with the fact that we've had a bunch of Medicaid cuts since COVID, because the feds have reinstituted the rule that you have to prove you're qualified for Medicaid, which is a standing rule before COVID. It was suspended during COVID, now reinstituted. You have to prove you qualify for Medicaid in order to have Medicaid continue after a qualification period. And we've had a bunch of disqualifications or absence of requalifications occurring as a result of going back into this qualification rule. And there's various theories on why that is. Representative Mears's guesstimate is that it's because people don't know that they need to requalify, or they aren't getting the paperwork, or they've moved, or they don't have the time, or various excuses on why they haven't requalified. But the net result of whatever the reason is, the net result is there's been a significant drop in Medicaid qualifications in the state. That results in a drop in both state aid to Medicaid, as well as state spending for Medicaid. State roughly covers 50% of the cost of Medicaid. There's some exceptions to that, but plus or minus is 50% of the cost. So there's been a reduction in federal aid for Medicaid, federal payments for Medicaid, and a reduction in state payments going out the door for Medicaid. And Mears, in an effort to try to argue that we ought to, do something about this qualification issue, we ought to, suspend the rules, or we ought to do something to requalify all these people that are becoming unqualified. The reason we ought to do that is because Medicaid payments into the medical community are so important. The hospital, the health community in Anchorage in particular, but throughout the state generally, the health community is a big contributor to the economy. Medicaid is a big part of the funding for the health community. If we see a drop off in that funding, we see a drop off in funds going to the health community, and we see a drop off in economic activity. And in fact, she does a calculation that tries to show a drop in GDP, state GDP, that will result from this unfunding of Medicaid, and goes so far as to say it will result in a recession in the state as a result of the drop in Medicaid. And so she argues for, we need this additional Medicaid spending, we need this additional money to go into the economy. All of that, you're gonna blast that for the next hour. I am absolutely confident. My point is this: whenever anybody talks about increased spending, whenever anybody talks about we need to spend more, in this case, we need to rebuild the state spending for Medicaid. My question always should be, the first question out of my mouth is, who pays? Who are you proposing pay for that additional spending? And it's a question that nobody, the Republicans don't answer it when we're talking about royalty or suspended royalty payments. The Democrats don't answer it when they're talking about increased spending for K through 12 or reinstituted spending for Medicaid. Nobody talks about who pays. Nobody's willing to address that issue. The result of which is it's coming out of the PFD. The result of which is it's just silently being, Bert silently reducing the PFD to balance the budget, taxing middle and lower income Alaska families to balance the budget. And it galls me every time I see one of these. If we would have had more in the first segment, I would have talked about how it galls me that the Republicans aren't talking about who's going to pay for these subsidies that they want to throw into South Central. It galls me when the Democrats have these commentaries that say we need to increase K through 12, or we need to increase Medicaid, or we need to increase anything, and they don't talk about who's going to pay for it. They don't want to confront that because they know what the answer is, and they don't want to have to admit that it's the very people they claim to be helping that are going to be hurt as a result of the increasing PFD cuts in order to pay for these sorts of things.
Well, and the worst part about this one is it's not just the Alaskans, not just the state of Alaska part of the kick, but again, it's more about sucking more money out of the federal government to bolster the Alaska GDP. That's the worst part about this, is that, we won't get this federal aid, and the federal aid helps bolster the economy. And is that what we want? Is we want to create a dependency society where we are dependent on all these federal dollars paid for by other people, by the way. We take in much more in federal revenue than we expend out in tax revenues for the federal government. And so that's what it becomes. We just become a welfare state more and more with every passing year, and we become more dependent on the largesse of the government just to continue to survive.
Well, in the case of Medicaid, Michael, it's actually both. Because as I said, Medicaid's split about 50-50 between state funds and federal funds. And so she's not only complaining about, the absence of federal funds, that we want these federal funds back, but by implication, she's also saying, we need more state funds. We need the state funds to match to do that. This isn't, this sort of I want more federal funding isn't partisan. You see Dan Sullivan talk about it when he talks about stationing more troops or more airplanes or more military in Alaska. When people talk about more broadband in Alaska, more money for broadband, more money to help GCI meet their objectives in Alaska, or more money for roads, for federal funds for roads, or it's just, it goes on and on and on. This is another example of it, but it just goes on and on and on.
No, I mean, look, that's the thing. All I can do is when I picture Alaskans, in general in the United States, they're the poor cousins that are sitting there with their hand out of the back of the line going, please, we need more. We need more. We need. Now, I could make an argument about roads and infrastructure that we were promised that we never got, and that those monies have been misspent or misappropriated over the years, and we still deserve the infrastructure that we were promised at statehood, yada, yada, yada. But the thing is that that's just a fraction of the money that we're getting. The rest of it's going to programs like this, which is just freaking stupid that we cannot, in our own state, be self-sufficient in these cases when we are really one of the richer states in the country, and we have kind of access to our own destinies here. But instead, we've gotten so used to lying over and on the government teat that we don't even know, we can't even imagine a place where we are self-sufficient in our own state.
Yep. Yeah. Well, it's it is that also. And certainly, her argument is we need these funds, these federal funds, to help bolster the GDP, or else we're going to go into a recession. It's certainly in part that, but it's also in part, in the case of Medicaid, it's also in part we need more state funding. We need to, where we might have savings in state spending as a result of the reduction in Medicaid costs. We shouldn't do that. We need to get Medicaid back up, and we need to recycle those state funds right back into the health sector, or else, the health sector may decline, and that's going to kick off all sorts of bad recession. So it's an interesting article. As I say, you're probably going to spend the entire second hour on various aspects of it. But I just wanted to make clear that it's another one of those, we need more funding. We need more state spending. We need the state to step in here, but I don't want to address who's going to pay for all that.
And as you said, there's a theme of this. This could be again applied back to number one, and we got a couple minutes here. So, back to number one, talking about again Republicans intervening in the market in the gas for the Cook Inlet gas. It's the same kind of thing. Nobody's asking. This is a theme that could almost go through every one of the weekly top 3 items every freaking week, which is who pays. And the question is, who is paying? And as the state continues to expend more money that it takes in year after year after year, the bottom line is the people who pay are the median and lower income Alaskans. Those are the ones who are paying because their money, their share as royalty owners in the state of Alaska is being taken by the government by force and used and spent to bolster up all this government programs that are out there, and they're the ones that are paying the highest percentile price of any of this.
Yeah, exactly right, Michael. And the other piece of that, it's not only that middle and lower income Alaskans are paying vastly disproportionately for it, but it's that the top 20% and the oil industry and non-residents aren't paying any of it. And so they have no incentive to put on the brakes. From the standpoint of the Mirrors article, the docs are the doctors, health community are the real beneficiaries of Medicaid, right? The money doesn't go to to lower income Alaska families. It is paid on their behalf to the docs. It's the docs who get the money. The hospital, the medical community that gets the money. They're the ones that get it. Yet, because we use PFD cuts and the docs are in the top 20%, yet because we use PFD cuts to fund it, the docs don't have to pay anything for it. So there's no disincentive for them to say more. You and I go back to this sometimes, but one of the most shocking things was early in the Dunleavy administration when he was still pressing for spending cuts, and Medicaid was one of the areas that he was pressing for spending cuts. A meeting that he went to with doctors where the doctor said, "What are you doing? You can't cut this area. This is hugely important to us. This is a bunch of our revenue. You can't." It wasn't the the sick and infirm that were complaining about the Medicaid cuts. It wasn't their groups. It was the doctors that were complaining about cuts to Medicaid because it was cutting their revenue. But they're fine. They're fine with continuing that spending and using PFD cuts to pay for it because they get the best of both worlds. They get the revenue and they don't have to pay for it. They don't have to contribute to the cost. So there's all sorts of problems that we are creating in this economy by the subsidies that we're doing, and who's paying the costs of those subsidies and who's not paying the costs of those subsidies.
Again, the one question that doesn't seem to get asked is who pays in the long run. It's always just free money from somewhere. That seems to be how they act. It's just always free money from somewhere, and they need to get their fair share of it. All right, Brad, quick tease, 20 seconds, number 3.
Number 3 is there's actually a piece of good news on the K through 12 front. It sort of reverses a piece of bad news that we talked about a few weeks ago. And I want to talk about that small piece of good news on the K through 12 front.
So bad news and good news on the K-12 front. We're going to continue with this. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. We're going to be back right after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Gail said, remember when Al Gross bragged about how easy it was to bill $1 million? Yeah. That's exactly kind of what we're pointing at here. The other thing was I did see this, and Brad, I don't know if you saw this story this morning about the permanent fund basically nixing the aggressive investment plan, that they had been talking about to get the fund to $100 billion in a few years. Wasn't that the Stedman and Giesel? Weren't they big fans of that aggressive investing, says Gail? Maybe they're not entirely in the pocket of what's going on with the powers that be in the Senate. But, that's a good piece of news, I guess, at least.
Well, it is a good piece of news, sort of, for now. I mean, I don't think that battle's over. Basically, what happened yesterday was they had the special meeting where they could have engaged in various things, including, debt financed investing, borrowing a bunch of money in order to invest it on the expectation that the returns would exceed the cost of the debt, and they would get a margin off that, like hedge funds do, essentially turning our permanent fund into a hedge fund. There was another proposal to be more aggressive in investing and go after higher risk investments in the hope that they would result in higher reward, higher payoffs. That's sort of what some of the retirement funds that have since gone bankrupt did. And there were a couple of other proposals. I didn't take what came out of yesterday's meeting as a stake through the heart of those proposals. I took it more as, we're not ready to do that right yet because we really haven't explained it to anybody. I suspect we will see efforts to push those along because what the Dunleavy administration is trying to do, what those on the board who are pushing this, who were appointed by Dunleavy, are trying to do is they're trying to get the permanent fund to a size where it can fund government. Forget about the PFD. They're not really concerned about the PFD.
Right,
get it to a size where they can fund government so they don't have to tax anybody for the additional spending, so they can avoid those taxes. So it's a good thing that it didn't pass yesterday. I don't think it's dead, and it's something that I think we're going to be talking about until the next meeting in January of the board.
The next future meeting of the board as they continue to push for this constitutional amendment to turn the permanent fund into some kind of sovereign wealth fund or whatever, which again, just a huge mistake. Again, making us more dependent at every level on government. This is the other theme, and this is the theme that I've been warning about for 20 years in this state, that we are doing nothing but creating a dependency class in Alaska, and we continue to do so. I mean, one of the things that continues to stick out, and this has been true since Walker has been in office, but we currently have 1/3 of Alaskans on medical welfare, on Medicaid. That, I mean, 1/3 of the state, 270,000 people are on government assistance in that regard. And that's a mind-blowing number at this point. Again, consumers versus producers, this is what you got.
And Michael, I'm gonna throw in my 2 cents on this. We've got 1/5 of Alaskans, the top 20%, who aren't paying for it. I mean, so you want to talk about dependence, government dependency, or a dependent economy, or a subsidized economy. That's also part of the subsidized.
It's true. I mean,
economy.
and I know, the successful Alaskans. Why should you pick on successful Alaskans? Well, when they're continuing their successful run on the backs of lower and middle income people, that's a problem. I'm not against being successful. I'm not against the free market and the idea of making it and doing well for yourself. But you can't throw the little people under the bus at the same time and say, I want all this stuff, but we're going to let the little people pay for it throughout the time. By the way, my business is based on a lot of that stuff, and we're going to have the little people pay for it. That's where robber barons came from, right? I mean, that's the whole idea. I mean, that's exactly what that's all about.
Oh, exactly right. And Michael, this myth that I'm trying to push costs off on the top 20%, I'm not. If the top 20% had to pay, they would push back on the costs. The problem here is the Natasha von Imhoffs and others who say, oh, don't tax me, take it out of the PFD, tax middle and lower income Alaska families, and continue to spend. If she had to pay, if Bert had to pay, if Click had to pay, if Giesel had to pay, they would be pushing back on spending. But right now, because we're using PFD cuts as the mechanism, the successful Alaskans don't care about spending. That's the problem.
And why would they be pushing back? Because their constituency, their donor class would also be pushing back on, whoa, wait a second. I'm getting eaten alive here. You got to stop and slow down with this spending. But because it comes from this empty bucket that nobody ever sees, that's where we end up at. All right, Brad Keithley, our guest. We're going to jump into it. Here we go, the weekly top 3. Jesus. Oh, my brain is going to explode in hour 2. All right, here we go. Jumping back into it. Let's do this thing. All right, we're back. Brad Keithley, our guest, the weekly top 3. Some good news and some bad news on education, although I've got thoughts on this as well. Brad, hit me with the thoughts here. Here we go.
This is just this whole segment is just an entire setup for your second hour.
Oh, it's the second hour. Hour 2 is going to be on fire. I guarantee it right at this point.
All right, so there's an article, The Juneau Empire, this week that says the headline is school district gets $2.8 million of bad news due to low enrollment and audit, but also $2.3 million of good news. Well, the bad news is that that enrollment in the Juneau school district is down. Guess where it's going? It's going to homeschooling. But enrollment's down, and so Juneau's share of state funds is going to go down as a result of enrollment being down. Here's and that's bad news for Juneau. Not that I care a lot about Juneau, but it's bad news. It's bad news for Juneau. But here's the good news that I think is something that we need to recognize. In an earlier segment a few weeks ago, I talked about an effort by the state, started with Juneau, but then expanding to other school districts, to disallow expenditures that were being made sort of on the side by the school district and booster clubs and others to help support various activities at the schools, disallowing those and essentially saying, look, you can't spend those funds. The reason the state was saying that, as they explained it at the time, was it was causing some school districts to be more than 20%, 25%. Spend more than 20 or 25% higher than other school districts. and that put federal rural assistant education funds at risk. The feds have a rule that one district can't be more than X percent, 20 or 25% out of disproportionately higher than other school districts. And if they are, then the federal rural education assistance is terminated. And so the state was pressing back on Juneau, saying, look, these side funds that you're spending are causing us to go in violation of the REA rule and putting at risk the federal funds that we're getting from REA. There were two ways to handle that. One was, and so Juneau was complaining about having to cut back on those side funds. The point I made at the time was that was going to increase pressure on for K through 12 funding, because the one way to handle that is to increase funding to the lower school districts and reduce the disproportion between the lower school districts and Juneau. And so I was concerned that what the Dunleavy administration's effort was going to do was increase the pressure for K through 12 spending. Well, in this article, down toward the bottom, there's a report that the Dunleavy administration has pulled back on pushing Juneau and presumably the other school districts on that rule. They're no longer going to disallow the funds that Juneau's spending on these side approaches and reduce it.
Because one of the exemptions from the federal rule is non-student, not education costs like transportation. And that's what they were saying, is that millions of these dollars were going into things like buses and transportation and stuff like that. And they said, wait, that's exempt. And the state has agreed, oh yeah, I guess we were wrong. Those were exempt.
The article is not clear, and I've not had time to dig into it on exactly what's going on. I mean, the state was saying that the feds who make the rule and enforce the rule, it was the feds who were saying those side funds were violating the rule. And it could be that the state misinterpreted the feds. It could be that the state has pushed back on the feds, and the feds are now saying that those side funds don't count. It also could be that the state has said, we're not going to worry about REA funds. Alaska is not the only state that theoretically can qualify for REA funds, and other states, when faced with this rule and the consequences of this rule, have said, we just won't take the REA funds. So it could be that Alaska is saying, we just won't take the REA funds and we won't worry about this anymore. It's not clear from the article what's going on, and the Dunleavy administration has not been particularly clear on its website or elsewhere about why it's doing what it's doing. But for whatever reason, it's pulling back on pushing this issue with Juneau and counting these side funds or treating these side funds as a problem. The administration is pulling back on that. The consequence of that is the pressure that added on K through 12 funding to deal with this issue through increased K through 12 funding. That pressure is going away, and that's a good thing because it means that at least that argument, we're going to have other arguments, but at least that part of the argument for increased K through 12 is sort of evaporating in the night.
Well, and of course, that's good news, bad news, right? So the bad news is lower enrollment, which is not just a Juneau problem, by the way. I'll point out that they're just finishing up the counting period right now for the state, right? And it's already been predicted that there's going to be almost a record low enrollment across the state in the various districts. So everybody's going to be facing that. So that's the bad news. You're going to lose a bunch of money there based on student count. The good news is here they get some of it back on the other side. But again, that's not what they're talking about, is not necessarily dollars in the classroom. Not that they're mandated to spend dollars in the classroom, but it's not education dollars as more as it is infrastructure dollars.
Right. It's what was going for, as you said, it was going to help support various activities outside the classroom, the dollars that were going to help support various activities outside the classroom. But it's welcome news. I mean, K through 12 is going to be a battle this time. It was a battle last year. It's going to be a battle this year. There are a lot of arguments that are going to be made for it, but this, at least this one seems on track to evaporate and not become a big part of the debate.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. It looks like, and it wasn't just Juneau that received a letter. There were many other districts that,
Right.
after Juneau was the first, right, but many
Right.
other districts. And the article alludes to the fact that it looks like they may be pulling back, not just from Juneau, but from other districts as well.
Right. And Juneau was sort of the canary in the coal mine, right? It was the first one that received the letter, the first one that was making the issue, and now it's the first one that's sort of indicating that the issue is receding.
Right.
As I say, good news. It's not going to blow away the K through 12 argument, but at least it blows away one piece of the K through 12 argument.
All right, Brad, 3 minutes here. Final thoughts on all the weekly top three today. Any final thoughts on number three? What say you in this regard?
Well, I just the subsidy argument, both that we discussed in the second segment, and the subsidy argument that we discussed in the first segment, the subsidy of South Central energy consumers by the state's actions, the state's intervening in the market. Those are just troublesome. I mean, do we believe in markets or don't we? If we do believe in markets, we ought to let markets function. If we don't believe in markets, then okay. But that creates all sorts of inefficiencies out there, creates all sorts of subsidies, and creates all sorts of costs. In the case of the Cook Inlet, it's a cost that will be spread spread throughout the state. Essentially, what the Dunleavy administration is proposing is that the state subsidize South Central. It was telling that in the legislature, the Alaska House Majority's letter, it was 3 South Central legislators that were quoted: George Rauscher, Tom McKay, and Ben Carpenter, that were quoted as saying, "Yeah, we're going to give this deep consideration." Well, hell yeah, they're subsidizing your ratepayers, I guess so. But let's look at the overall consequence of what's going on, and the same thing's true of Medicaid. We need to keep in mind that markets work, but for markets to work, we have to let them work, and we have to let the state. We have to keep the state out of it and allow the market to go forward. And I just, it's frustrating to see. It's frustrating enough to deal with that when Democrats argue that we need to intervene in the market. It's hugely frustrating to see Republicans now start to argue that we need to intervene in the market. And they'll say, "Oh, it's just this one, just this market," but it's intervention in the market, and that then just triggers off all sorts of inefficiencies and all sorts of cross subsidies. We need to let markets work.
Yeah, well, again, the major problem with this in the state of Alaska is the fact that the public and the private economies are divorced from each other. And they don't want to let the market work because they don't care about the market. They believe that the government knows best. And as long as the government economy is doing fine, everything's fine. Fine, just fine. The room's on fire, but this is fine. And that's where we're at right now. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Brad, thank you so much for coming on board today.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Hour 2 is dead ahead. Buckle up, Buttercup. It's going to be a wild ride. We're back with more after this. I mean, that's really the case here, Brad, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a D or an R in this state. And I read through all the statements that the House Majority put out, and I mean, Ben Carpenter, who I'm a huge fan of Ben Carpenter. At least he said, I'm looking forward to discussing this proposal in the months ahead. I don't take that as an implicit endorsement necessarily, but I mean, I think it's going to be interesting. But again, this all leaks back. This all trickles down from the fact that the Alaska economy is busted. It's not intertwined like every other state. Every other state, the public and the private economy are inexorably intertwined, and they have to work together. And in Alaska, it just don't matter. It just don't matter. The state's going to do what the state's going to do as long as the state has control. It doesn't matter what happens in the private economy because they don't care. And, unless, of course, maybe it affects their donor class. Anchorage is the largest, of course, community in the state. And if they don't subsidize those guys, those folks might get mad if their energy cost goes up. Try living in Fairbanks for a while to see how your heating and your energy costs go up every month, every year. I can't even to do the calculation on how much I've saved by moving to the South Central area. You have no idea. I mean, I still pay. I think I probably pay 20 maybe 25% on an annual basis for heating of what I paid in Fairbanks right now. Just think about that for a minute. I mean, the amazing savings just in that area alone. But we wouldn't want Anchorage or South Central to pay any more because that's the donor class, and we don't want to, that's the big chunk of people, and we don't want to mess with them in that regard. But again, it's that disconnect. Am I wrong?
No, you're exactly right, Michael. I mean, you're exactly right. Everybody, I mean, part of the problem, we've disrupted markets so much in this state that we don't really understand when we're doing it anymore. I mean, we've allowed the government to become such a big player in what goes on in this state that it's just, I mean, the first reaction, Dunleavy's first reaction is, oh, well, we'll just give away royalty. We'll just take away royalty. They've already taken away tax in Cook Inlet. That was gone in the 2000s at some point. Tax got eliminated. Now we're going to take away royalty. Now we're going to zero out royalty. You don't even think, I mean, government is so intertwined with how things operate in this state that the reaction is always, well, we'll do something. Government will do something. We'll give away another subsidy. We'll create another freebie so that disruption doesn't occur. And it's just at some point you want it to stop. But to get it to stop, you got to point out when it's happening. And I would doubt that George Rauscher understands that he's arguing for a subsidy. I would bet he would say he's not doing that, but that's exactly what he's doing. And to get this stuff to stop, to get back to a market economy, to create a market economy in Alaska, you've got to point out when this stuff's going on. And this is as clear an example as any of the other examples. It's as clear an example as Donna Mears's. We need more money. We need all that federal money to support the state because otherwise we'll go into a recession. This is the Republican equivalent of Donna Mears saying we need to reduce royalty or else Anchorage will have to pay more for energy. Oh, that's horrible. I mean, it's just, and the state can do something about it. My gosh, we can give away more money. So let us give away more money.
How shocking. We have to be seen doing something about this. We've got to do something,
It's always going backwards.
Yeah.
It's always, yes, we'll give you more money. In Parnell's day is, yes, we'll give you state savings. Here, take money, take state money. Don't negotiate a higher price for the Cook Inlet that would incentivize production. Here, just take state money to keep your margins where they otherwise would be.
Oh my God, this explains a lot. I'm going to post this comment just because I think it explains everything at this point. Here's Harold's comment. This is why we don't offer private sector services and only focus on government spending. Got to pay what he's saying is his business does not provide private sector services. He's focused on the government spend too. That explains a lot at this point. That explains a whole hell of a lot at this point.
And docs. I mean, to pick up on Donna Mears's thing again. Docs. Oh my God, don't cut Medicaid. I mean, my God, what would we do without Medicaid revenues? We'd have to, actually go out and get services in the private sector. We'd have to, deal with costs in the private sector, lower our costs there. I mean, don't cut Medicaid.
Docs, telecom, construction, road crews, Herald services, all of those businesses that are predicated exclusively on government spending. Big shocker that they're upset when with that. I mean, we are creating a dependency economy, period. And we're reaping those rewards right now. That's what's happening, right, Brad?
We've created.
We've created. Yes, you're right. 100%.
We're adding to it.
I stand corrected. You are 100%. We have created and we are continuing to foster a dependency economy in this state. That's
what this royalty proposal is. That's what the Dunleavy royalty proposal is to continue to foster this dependency economy by having the state subsidize South Central energy costs by reducing the supply side costs. It's just continuing. Ben talked himself into it, taxing Alaskans.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Brad, thank you so much for coming on board today and joining us. We appreciate that.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me, and have a great second hour.
Oh, man. Get ready for it, folks. In fact, I'm going to have to restart the broadcast. Not restart, but I'm going to have to reload my site, so you're going to see a blue screen for a minute, folks. Here we go. Thank you, Brad. We're going to jump into it. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the Michael Duke Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning and welcome to Hour 2 of the Big Radio Show for Tuesday. We just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Brad was kind enough to come on board and give us the weekly top 3. And boy, I tell you, there's a lot to unpack here. And I'm going to spend the next hour doing just that. I should go ahead, I guess, and open up the phone lines as well to allow you to have your, for you to vent your spleen in this regard, because I am just, I'm just so hacked off about some of the things that are going on out there. You have no idea how agitated I am about many of these things. And so I'm going to talk about that. Now, unfortunately, I guess for you, there is no Chris Story to help alleviate those pains at the end of the show today. Chris is not going to be joining us today. Unfortunately, we will be talking with him on Thursday. He and I will hang out and we'll talk about a bunch of stuff, and we're going to go through all that, and we'll get that weekly balm that we need from Chris Story in Hour 2. So we look forward to seeing him and talking with him and doing all that stuff. So in the meanwhile, we're going to continue here. I am opening up the phone lines so that if you do want to sound off during this hour, you're happy, you're able to do so. So the number to call is 907-433-3150. 907-433-3150 is the phone number, and you can call in and be ready to sound off on whatever it is that you want to sound off about. And of course, those phone lines powered by our friends over there at Satellite West for the best in communications across the state of Alaska. Satellite West is the place to be. Go to satellitewest.com, find out all their local dealers, whether it's a satellite telephone or a bivy stick or the brand new Motorola product, which is an amazing piece of kit as well. You could find all about those things at satellitewest.com. So thank them for sponsoring the program today. Okay, so phone lines are open, and we're ready to go. So first and foremost, all of Brad's weekly top three have had a couple of themes over the last over the last few years. And the theme always seems to be basically the fact that many people are continuing to ignore the who pays question. Who pays for this? The second theme is that we have not only created a dependency state in the state of Alaska, where we have become dependent on government largesse for just about everything. We have continued to foster that at every turn. That at every turn of the screw, we have given into that. We have embraced it. You got, again, Harold bragging in the chat room that, hey, I got $6,000 bills, and the only way to get that is, can't do that invoicing private companies. I can only do that. Basically, I guess the implication there is by gouging the government to get it, because private sector doesn't pay like the government does. And unfortunately, that's the attitude of many small businesses out there and larger businesses who have become dependent on this. So we created and fostered a dependency state, not just on the traditional, what conservatives would think of as the traditional dependency state, where we create and have a social safety net of, healthcare and housing and food, all those kind of things, but also on the other side, the crony capitalism side, where companies have built entire business plans based around nothing but public sector spending, government spending. That's the whole, that's what they built their whole business. So we've got a dependency on both the left and the right side of the political spectrum that's going on. And nobody says nothing about it. I guess except me. Nobody says anything about it, the dangers of this right now. And now on top of this, we've got the discussion that somehow we have inexorably been, driven a line of division or separation between the public economy and the private economy here in the state of Alaska that exists nowhere else in the United States. Nowhere else are they completely divorced from the income of what's happening and the things that are being generated and the revenues that are being generated in the private economy to help fund government, because they got their own source of lucre and they continue to draw off of it. And as long as that's there, they're happy to do it. So we've got these three things that basically, these are three thematic things that run through every news story, every weekly top three segment that Brad and I have done for the last, we've been doing this for 10 years now. 10 years he and I have been talking about the weekly top three, and it seems like it could be a record on repeat. We probably could go back to the 10-year ago mark and go back to our first weekly top three and have exactly some of the same problems, but each one at its core would have those three things wrong with it. Those three things would be the base lesson to learn out of all this, is that one, nobody's asking who pays. Two, nobody's, you've got a dependency state that is both for the left and the right. And three, the complete separation and line in the sand between the public and the private economy. This is a consistent problem. Again, I've been squawking about the dependency state for years in this, on this program. And again, maybe I'm just shouting into the wind and nothing, it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. You're just griping. But we're seeing more and more of this happen. Now, I'm going to go back and I want to dissect a couple of things out of this. The weekly top three. I guess this is my dissection of Brad's top three items. We're going to start with his number one, which of course was the governor's plan to basically intervene in the free market and to incentivize cook inlet gas by allowing reduced or eliminated royalties for those specific fines and those specific fields. And what does it mean? Because Brad is 100% right on this. When we basically take a specific field that is feeding a specific locale, and in this case, South Central, which is the largest between Anchorage with 270,000 people and the Matsu with another, whatever it is, 115, 120,000 people in it. Well, you've got the lion's share of the state, right? You have over probably, I imagine between the two, we're talking about over probably 60% of the overall population of the state resides in the Matsu and in the city of Anchorage, the municipality of Anchorage. So you've got the largest share of constituencies in that area. And, we've got a bit of a crisis going on. This gas shortage is a real thing. And what's happening is we've got this hesitancy by the local utilities to pass the real cost of what it takes to heat or create electricity or do all those things to get the resources to create the utilities, whether it's heat or power. And we have a hesitancy from these companies to pass on the true costs to their customers. They're worried about it. Now, again, I will point out that what I have paid over the last 10 years, that my average heating bill here in the Matsu, and this is what I tell people when they say, "Oh, I can't believe you moved down south." My average heating bill is about 20, maybe 25%. 20 to 25% of what it was that I paid on an annual basis in Fairbanks. And that is after I did all the 5-star improvements that I could do to my 40-year-old home, blue insulation in the roof and new windows and did all the things and weather seals and doors and did everything that I could do to make it hurt. I was still paying 4 to 5 times a month in the dead of winter of what I'm paying. Now, granted, it's colder there. There's a lot, but I was working on heating. Again, 20%, 20 to 25% of what I'm paying right there. So I would think that people in Fairbanks who are still shouldering that cost right now that I've avoided by moving out, they would be a little pissed off about the fact that the government seems to be hell-bent for election on protecting the pocketbooks of people in the Anchorage municipality and the Matsu, in the South Central area as a whole. That they're talking about dropping the royalties, they've dropped the tax payments, they're doing everything else to try and incentivize. If there is gas there, and if there is demand, and if the price is at a fair market value and not some kind of artificially induced level, then somebody will build something, somebody will go out there and drill, and if not, we'll be able to import. Now, do I feel like, Do I feel like that I would love to see the fact that Alaska would have to, with 17 trillion cubic feet of gas on the North Slope, do I feel like it really, is a good feeling to have to import gas to South Central because we can't figure out how to make it economically feasible to get that gas from the North Slope down to the South Central area? I mean, I feel bad about it, but that's also the reality of economics. But the fact that you've got Republicans who are ostensibly free market, less governmental intervention, all these things that we could list off on the platform kind of people, supposedly, now turning around and saying, we will incentivize you, we will allow you to take our finite natural resource without any royalty payment or anything else, just get it to us and it'll be fine. The loss of that revenue, of course, has to be made up somewhere else. And in this case, they're making up the loss of that revenue on PFD cuts and other things, which means, again, that the ones that are feeling the most impacted by that are the lower or median income folks in the state of Alaska, because as a proportion of their income, those PFD cuts hit harder than anything else that the state could possibly do. So you've got Republicans who are out there saying no taxes for at any level, none of this stuff. We will do everything we can to avoid it, including carving into the lower and middle class like there's no tomorrow and there's not a single thing you can do about it. And at least we can be seen, as they straighten their ties, we can be seen to be doing something. It's insane. It's absolutely insane that this is where we're at right now. So that's number one. The fact that, again, we've got Republicans who are even considering getting more in and interfering more in the free market than ever before. So we'll continue to talk about that as well. But number two on the weekly top three was this discussion by Donna Mears, which is a prime example of the problem specifically with the idea that we are creating a dependency state. And I'm gonna dive down into that. Now, the phone lines are open. If you want to interrupt me, you could feel free to do so. 907-433-3150. We're going to continue here in just a moment, and we'll be back. Don't go anywhere. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio, The Michael Duke Show. Back with more right after this.
Your mental suppository. The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Okay, Golden Valley is trying to shift costs to Anchorage by shuttering Healy 2 because it uses coal. This is Dick's comment in the chat room right now. Yeah, I mean, again, I've never understood the fact that we have become more and more dependent on all this other stuff just because we're going to eliminate coal. It's cheaper for me, says Bill. It's cheaper for me to bring home rolled diesel 5 gallons at a time than having fuel oil delivered. Does that sound regulate? Why would you bring home road diesel? You pay more for that than if you just went and got heating fuel pumped into a drum or something. Because I've been there, Bill. There were times in Fairbanks when I was, we were having a hard time or whatever, that I was buying, heating oil 15 gallons at a time in a 15-gallon drum. I'd go down to the local bulk plant and I'd get 15 gallons of fuel. I have to do that every 2-3 days. Just until we got, till I got paid next or I got my next big thing. I mean, it's happened over the years. We've had to do that. I've been there with you. Gail says, I understand it's for plane fare, but why is the state paying for this? What do you mean by that? Gail, what he's saying is he went to some village dedication with all his family, cost him $6,000, and the private sector isn't paying for that. He's billing the state government for his services in his business, and that's what's paying for his thing. That's what he's talking about. He's basically, his business is government. He's working, doing all of his consultancy with the government. Okay, great. But it explains a lot. Again, when you say something like, I don't offer my services to the private sector. I only offer it to the government spending because they're the ones with the money. Which again says a lot about the mindset that we're talking about here. It's all I was saying. Good for him. Good for him. But again, dependency state. We are there right now. Bill says I paid $5.40 a gallon for heating oil. Diesel is $4.90. Wow, that's with the road taxes, because usually the diesel was more expensive than the heating oil because of road taxes and everything else. But hey, Bill, whatever works for you, my friend. That is that's what it is. Cindy says she's happy that the littles get to trick or treat with no snow on the ground. This is the second time in 10 years this has happened for us. Halloween, no snow. Thank you. Thank you all for doing the anti-snow dance with me for the last few weeks. If it snows tomorrow, I guess I'm okay with that. Although I'd love to have a winter like that first winter that we had down here, 2013, 2014, when it was just no snow hardly at all. We got some snow for Thanksgiving. Then it melted away again. Then we got some snow mid-December and had a white Christmas. And then it melted again in January. Then we got a heavy snow in March. I mean, I'd be okay with that. I'm okay with that, one way or the other. That doesn't hurt my feelings at all. That's almost as good as a nice warm summer. That's for me, personally. Okay. I'm just going back up here to see Chris Byers, you got me hooked on North Pole coffee. I'll tell you, when I can't get a cup of beard curler, there ain't nothing better than a cup of St. Nickerdoodle. Absolutely. St. Nickerdoodle coffee from North Pole Coffee Roasters. That's a good cup of joe right there. Delicious. You can get it at Costco, I think. That's where I've been buying mine, big 2-pound bags. So when I'm out of beard curler, I can't get it or, whatever, that's my go-to is that North Pole Coffee Roasters Company. That stuff is delicious. Okay. Come to Fairbanks. We have snow. I was in Fairbanks 2 weeks ago, and there was plenty of snow for me. I was like, yep, I'm done with that. Thank you. All right. We're getting ready to jump back into it. Let's go. We're going to dissect this article from what's her face, Donna Mears. We're gonna talk about that here. Where is it right here? There we go. There's the article. I'm posting it up in the chat room. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. All right, welcome back to the program, The Michael Duke Show. Jeannie in the chat room just said something interesting, and I'm going to explain why there's a difference here. This just came up. We were talking during the break about some of the different things. Jeannie in the chat room says, I tend to use the lower 48 vernacular welfare state. Let me tell you why I don't use the term welfare state. Instead, I use the term dependency state, because when you say welfare state, I mean, obviously there's negative connotations to both phrases. But I think the big thing is that when you say welfare state, people immediately gravitate towards the idea that you're talking exclusively about the social safety net component of welfare, right? Free medical, free housing, free food, all that kind of stuff. That's what they're thinking of. But in the state of Alaska, we're a welfare state, but we've created a dependency state for both the left and the right. What I was talking about earlier. We have a tremendous amount on the social safety net, welfare, people who've become dependent on that. But we also have all these people on the right in corporations and companies and businesses that have built their whole business model around sucking off the teat of the government. Right? And so that's why I use the term dependency state instead of welfare state, because it doesn't just single out the social safety side of that. That's why I say that to begin with. Now, I want to get into this article. This is number 2 of Brad's weekly top 3, which is the article by Donna Mears. It's an opinion piece that talks about, the headline reads, Medicaid cuts threaten the broader economy. And I'm going to dissect this piece a little bit. She's specifically talking about Medicaid in this case, but it gives you a deep insight into the mind of many of these people who are in government on both the left and the right. She happens to be progressive, but this is a problem on both the left and the right at this point in our state government. And I'm going to dive down into that. I want to get into the details of that, but I do have a phone call. So first things first, I guess we'll take a phone call and see what you have to say before we get started. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good morning, Michael. This is Carlene in Kodiak, and your topic is near and dear to my heart, and I long for you to get into the Donna Mears topic. In Kodiak, the governor and our senator from here about a year ago have given tax credits to the canneries, and my friend said that the canneries, they aren't even Alaskan people. And then that goes along with your Republicans interfering in the public market. And then the second thing is enrollment in the school system is down 10%, as far as I know, if it hasn't gone down further in Kodiak schools, but they still have a shortfall of $2.1 million. And then something that has been near and dear to me is borrowing money from China and Japan and all these other countries and the printing more money. And our Native Association, the medical, dental, counseling, social workers, has a surplus of $7 to $8 million a year. And I thought it was Health and Human Services from the state of Alaska for Medicaid, but it's apparently mixed, probably a big portion of Indian health money. So I would like to talk about the bycatch, but today is not the day to do that. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Caroline. I agree. I would like to talk about the bycatch as well, but that is kind of a whole show in and of itself. But you're right. It is the government interfering in the market in many ways. I mean, canneries in Kodiak, they're going to operate canneries around the country. Are they going to operate? Do they require governmental interference in the forms of subsidies and other things to keep them open? Or is it just a way to pacify and make these people happy? Again, the government picking winners and losers is a big problem. And that's what governments have been doing for a long time. And ever since, when John J. Hill first started the whole thing with the railroads and everything else. And that was really the birth in the United States anyway of some crony capitalism. And it's just gotten worse from there. All right, we're going to go over to this article. And again, written by Donna Mears, who represents District 21 in Anchorage. She's a representative in the Alaska House. The title of the article is Medicaid Cuts Threaten the Broader Economy. She starts out by talking about what happened during the pandemic. Now, what happened during the pandemic, this was a governmental knee-jerk response to everything, is that the federal government decided during the early months of the pandemic that because people were out of work, they'd closed down the economy and everything else, they took emergency action to change some of the rules of the Medicaid program. Basically, what they did was they stopped the eligibility checks, meaning, are you eligible for Medicaid? And that was normally done, I think was it quarterly? Anyway, it was done quite frequently that they would check to see, are you still eligible for this free government health care? During the pandemic, they shot that down. They shut that part of it down and said, if you are enrolled now, you're enrolled until we turn this emergency order off. Now, of course, we know that emergency existed for, we're going on 3.5 years now. And they made a decision to go ahead and to stop that eligibility, which not only swelled the rolls because more and more people became eligible throughout that time, but again, created even more dependency than what we had to begin with. Now she's lamenting the fact that pandemic program is winding down. She goes on to say tens of thousands of Alaskans have lost Medicaid health insurance as the Department of Health has struggled to adjust to a new federal program requirements. It's not a new federal program requirements, Donna. It's the old requirements that were hiatused due to an emergency. I love how they love to spin this language like it's some kind of new program. No, it's just going back to the old rules as they were that had been suspended because of the pandemic. Then she goes on to talk about losing medical coverage can be devastating for the individual. These disenrollments will also hurt the broader Alaska economy. Again, talking about how it's imperative that we keep government spending up because it protects the economy. We could be plunged into a recession, she goes on to talk about. Beginning last year, the pandemic health emergency authorities expired, and now all 50 states must confirm everyone's eligibility basically by having everyone reapply, which again doesn't seem like something that's unreasonable. I'm not against having a social safety net. I mean, I'll be the first to say that I'm not against that necessarily. What I'm against is creating a social safety net that gobbles up huge swathes of the population and allows them to basically become dependent on government spend for their life, their livelihood, their health, whatever else. So she goes on to talk about the struggle that the Department of Health and Social Services and the Division of Public Assistance is going through. She said Alaska started its eligibility redetermination process in April, checking every beneficiary in the state, which is about 260, almost 270,000 Alaskans. I want you to just sit back for a second, wherever you are, wherever you're listening, put your cup of coffee down, do whatever. And I want you to think about that for just a second. We live in a state with 700 and change, 715, 720,000 people in it. And we have 260,000 of them on a government program for healthcare. As of September 30th, the Division of Public Assistance has finished processing 45,000 beneficiaries of the 260,000. Of whom 60% have lost their coverage. These are mostly people. Well, God, I would hope so. Many of them with kids who meet the eligibility, but they're losing their health insurance anyway, mostly because the state couldn't reach them or get them to produce necessary documents. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have to do a little work there? Did you have to provide some documentation to prove that you need to get this free money? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have to be a little proactive and reach out to the program yourself? Or are you waiting for the state to knock on your door and give you the free wads full of cash for everything you need? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Was that so hard? I'm sorry. They're losing their health insurance anyway, mostly because the state couldn't reach them or get them to produce necessary documents. Many states are having difficulty with these redeterminations, but Alaska is amongst the worst. 44th of 50 states. Well, we should be used to that. We're in the lowest rankings for just about everything in the country right now. I mean, economy, jobs, education, welfare re-enrollment. Okay, I mean, it's just par for the course. Just mark that one up right there. The feds recently asked the Department of Health to pause some disenrollments, and they have, but the share of people contacted who are found eligible remains low. So even though the feds has asked them to stop disenrollment, which again, the emergency order is done, how can you do that? How can you say, no, keep them enrolled? They don't qualify, but keep them enrolled. How is that even legal? I mean, they do have to follow the law, but the share of people who contacted who are found eligible remains low, just 32%. Let's just bump that up to 40. So 270,000 people in Alaska on the dole, medical dole in this case, and yet only 40% are truly eligible. But we're okay with that. If this pace continues, nearly 150,000 Alaskans could lose coverage as redetermination progresses. Great. Isn't that the point? Isn't that the point? I mean, welfare is not supposed to be a lifelong thing. Medicaid is not supposed to be a lifelong thing. It's supposed to be something that helps you out in a period of need, and then you're supposed to grab yourself up by your bootstraps and jump forward and make a difference. Shouldn't we be celebrating the fact that 150,000 of the 270,000 who are enrolled will be off of coverage? Shouldn't that be a great... No, we want you right there. Just being right there on the teat. Oh, no, we want you. We want to take cradle to grave, baby. Government will take care of you. She goes on to say that losing 150,000, that could be catastrophic. Catastrophic. Oh, by the way, healthcare accessibility would also be affected as many providers count on revenue from Medicaid patients to keep their doors open. Well, that sounds like a personal problem to me. If you're building your whole business around government largesse and government spend, and suddenly that spend stops, that sounds like piss poor planning on your part. What you're basically saying is, oh, we need to spend this money to keep these people open. I don't see any money being funneled at my business or my radio stations or anything else, or Joe down the street or Jeff down the street who fixes my car. I don't see any dollars from the state government going to his business to keep his doors open specifically. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry that you didn't plan properly. I'm sorry that you built your whole business model on something that is amorphous or doesn't respond to market trends. Well, I'm sorry about that. Sucks to be you. But we'll have less doctors. That's what the free market brings, folks. It's got its ups and its downs. And the problem is that when government intervenes, they screw it all up. Oh, I'm going to lose my mind here in a second. I haven't even gotten to the good part yet. I haven't even gotten to the best part yet. We're going to be back. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Going to try and finish up on number 2 and get to number 3 in just a moment. Back with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, true. How dare you? How dare the state only give Medicaid to people who are eligible for Medicaid? The audacity! I mean, it's the audacity that we would just... I mean, this is just amazing, you know? Man. Going back through here. Some of us have to buy insurance on the marketplace to keep from being forced into a community spouse. I'm assuming a community space is what you're saying there. I don't, if that's autocorrect or not. Yeah, some of us are just making it out on the marketplace because that's the only thing we have available to us at this point. Mike says, get real. Being on welfare is now being passed on from one generation to the next by many. It's true. Generational welfare. I mean, again, welfare. I'm not against a social safety net. But when it becomes generational, that's a problem. Again, we should be celebrating the fact that half the people who are on the Medicaid rolls are no longer eligible. Because that means that they've pulled themselves up out of their situations. When I was talking about how the government is not spending money, to bolster up or prop up my business or my buddy's business down the road or your business, Mike says, nope, I have a small business as well. Not only do they not give me money, they put their hand out every year in taxes for money from me. Yes, they do. Wait, counterpoint, says Brian. The free market has also brought lots of innovation and an improvement in the quality and outcomes of medical care. This is part of the problem. I mean, the stymieing of this kind of stuff. Remember, there was a component in Obamacare that had almost a 3% excise tax on medical equipment. You remember that? That was in the initial version of Obamacare. It's since been repealed. But what they said was, this is going to stifle innovation on creating new equipment and doing everything else because of the costs involved. And if it's a high paying, and what it happened, they eventually had to repeal it. I mean, that's exactly it. Government stifling innovation. I had a biopsy that would have netted the hospital $6,000, but when my insurance refused to pay, my tab went to $20,000. I'm still paying for it. You know, here's a secret. Can I give you a secret? We just used this recently. My daughter had to go to the emergency room earlier this year, and she's an adult now, and so I told her, you know, you've got to handle this. You've got to work through this. But I told her, when they give you this, make sure you demand an itemized bill, because they were giving her this huge bill for this ER visit. And she has insurance. We have insurance, but she was still getting hit with this huge part of the bill. And I said, make sure that you ask for you demand an itemized line by line bill. And so she called and said, look, I'm currently unemployed. I'm making payments. The payments are small, but we got to figure something out here. Oh, by the way, I need a line by line itemized bill of everything you're charging me for here, because this bill seems pretty high. And what did they do? Oh, we'll be happy to clear that up for a fifth of what we just told you. Who's paying for all that extra free medical? You are. You are. You just don't know it. Alaska is the only state where Medicaid reimbursements are higher than Medicare. Medicare is not optional. Yeah, it's a job. Okay. Why do you listen, Harold? That's my question. Why do you listen? Is it just because you would just love to be contrary? Is that the thing? You know, you keep talking about how you miss Dan Fagan. Well, go listen to Dan Fagan. Oh, wait, Dan Fagan's not on the air anymore because he couldn't hack it because he was a pussy. Oh, okay. I get it. Okay. Got it. He was consistently conservative. If you only knew Dan Fagan. Oh, Harold. If you only knew, my friend. Oh, my God. Oh. It is amusing. He isn't. But again, Harold showed his colors when he talked about all this stuff. He's the only conservative lesson in the state of Alaska, but he won't do business with the private sector because they don't have any money. He's only going to do business with the government sector. So I know now why you talk so much, because your mouth is stuck in a permanent from sucking on the government teat so much. That's what's happening. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. All right, welcome back to the program. They said, tell me what you really think, Michael. Oh, you don't want to know what I really think, because I could probably be busted off the air by the FCC if I told you what I really thought today. All right, welcome back to the program, the Michael Duke Show. One final segment here of the program. I'm going to try and get to number 3, which was the Juneau School District issue, because I got some things to say about that as well. But let's get back to this letter from Donna Mears, who's a representative for Anchorage. And she has this article, this opinion piece in the ADN, talking about what a tragedy it would be. Tragic that people would get off of Medicaid. That it's shocking, I tell you, that 150,000 people could lose their Medicaid coverage because they don't qualify. This is basically an entire pitch to just expand Medicaid coverage to keep these people enrolled, to keep the government spend going. And then she goes on, because she apparently went to the Adam Smith School of Business and understands economics completely. She goes on to talk about it's a crisis for the whole economy. And let me just talk about the tone deafness of Donna Mears and others. It's not just Donna. I'm sure she's a wonderful lady, don't get me wrong. But this is the mindset. Here's what she wrote. With more than 1 in 3 Alaskans enrolled at the start of the year, the Medicaid program represents an enormous injection of federal money into our economy every year. She acts like that's a good thing. That 1 in 3, that 1/3 of our population is dependent on government for this stuff. And that we, in turn, as an economy, are now dependent on it every year. The state paid out roughly $2.2 billion in Medicaid benefits in 2022, of which $1.7 billion came from the federal government. Again, just the sounds of, we need all that money, Uncle Sugar. Can you help us out? We paid basically for a quarter of it. The federal government paid for $1.7 billion. What happens when the federal government runs out of money? I mean, I know people say that'll never happen. I don't know if you've been watching what's going on, but it ain't great at the national level. I mean, somebody's eventually going to have to call a woe back. Either they're going to have to cut the spending, or the wheels will come off the bus and something else will happen. But one or the other, because you can't continue to spend money you don't have. I don't care how big you think you are. I don't think if you think you're too big to fail, it's going to be okay. I mean, I got 3 words for you, for those of you who think that it's just too big to fail. Holy Roman Empire. End of story. Too big to fail. Including economic activity associated with that spending, the $2.2 billion, Medicaid directly generates nearly $4.5 billion in GDP, 7% of the statewide total. 7% of our entire GDP is based exclusively on the welfare spending. I mean, she acts like this is like with a smile on her face, like this is what we need. We need more of this. It shouldn't be 7%. It should be 14, 20, 25. If we cut our Medicaid population by more than 50%, Alaska's GDP could shrink by nearly 4%. That's a recession right there. Newsflash, genius. We have been in a recession in this state for years. We get little tiny micro bumps, but we're basically been in a recession. I mean, it's huge. Oh, and all that deficit spending, that's really going to help us in the long run as well. Then she goes on to talk about SNAP, which is the food stamp program, and how all this other kinds of stuff. But I mean, I feel like that's a whole other article about what we need to do. Oh, we've got a backlog in SNAP, and we've got all this other. Yes, we have a dependency state. We have a welfare state. We have a state where everybody's dependent on the government, and it's a crisis when we just can't get to it fast enough. Well, surprise, surprise, surprise. Government is inefficient in its movements, and this is just one. This whole, I hope you all go out and read this article and read the entire thing, and then, email me and tell me what you think. Am I being overly harsh on Ms. Mears? Ms. Mears? I don't know if it's Mrs. I don't want to offend anybody. I don't know if I'm being too harsh on her, or if I'm just getting a snapshot into the mind of a person that's supposed to be looking out for all Alaskans, but all this sounds like is a plea for more government spend into the economy. And how pleased she is that 1/3 of all people are on welfare. Medical welfare, in this case. It's insane. All right, I want to make I got about 4 minutes here. I want to make a brief commentary on the news story that Brad was talking about, the Juneau school districts, they get the good news and the bad news, right? The bad news is they lost $2.8 million due to low enrollment, but they also got the good news of they're getting the $2.3 million back for the outside non-educational spending. Okay, couple things to point out here. First and foremost, this is not just a Juneau problem. As Carlene just mentioned, she said 10%. I haven't seen the numbers from Kodiak. And of course, they're just finished. I think today or yesterday was the last day of the counting period for the students for student enrollment, where they got to count the butts in the seat to see how many students are enrolled for this year. But I know already that enrollment is down over 5% in almost every district in the state. Many more of those parents have decided to vote with their feet and move their kids to public or to private schools or to charter schools or to a shared plan or a learning pod or homeschooling or whatever they're doing. But it's another 5% drop. Do you think that they're going to ask for 5% less funding this coming year? Or do you think it's going to be more? I mean, I'm asking for a friend. Do you think it's going to be? I mean, they have this, and this is a national problem, my friends. This is not just, we talked about this with Sarah yesterday, Sarah Montalbano. This is a national problem. Enrollment in public school is down across the country because a lot of people had their eyes open during the pandemic about just how much these people really care about your kids. Oh, we won't go back to school until the social justice and there's equity in the thing and we've spread the wealth and distribution and all this other kind of stuff. That's all was coming out of California, by the way. They had all those demands that we're not going to, until there's social justice, we're not going to open schools up again, holding your kids hostage. This is how much they really care about the children. The net effect is, of course, is that enrollment in public school systems is cratering across the country faster than any curve that they expected. And so you're going to see a huge enrollment dip across the state of Alaska as well. Do you think it's going to slow down their ask? No. You think they're going to ask for more? Yes. They buckle up. This is coming. And I think it's just going to get worse as more and more parents discover that they were able to do things differently with their kids than make all. Now, let me comment quickly on this because I find this whole idea of this federal balancing act offensive. That what they're talking about was this the federal rule that says no community can have an education system that's funded 25% higher than the lowest system because of inequity. What? You can't fund outside of the school programs and the federal dollars. You can't fund beyond that if you want, even if you wanted to. It would be against federal law because the state takes this federal money. Remember, there's always a hook in the money. The hook in taking this money is that no district can be more than 25% higher in relative wealth or expenditures than any other. To which I go, what? What if a community wants to give more to their education system than some other community? Shouldn't that be a right? No, we can't do it. All the animals must be equal. The federal government coming down and saying, you can't spend more money on your kids in your community because we said so. You know what that sounds like? Boy, that sounds a lot like centralized planning and sounds like something the Politburo would have said back in the day. I mean, if you don't like your lower schools, your lower dollar amount schools, you could move to these other communities who are willing to spend more. It's still a free country, right? Oh, we've all got to be equal. All right, I'm out of time. I'll see you guys tomorrow. I ran out of time. Okay. I mean, I just, it's so insane. This whole thing. Thank you for the super sticker. My man, Jeremy out there hit me with a super sticker. Thank you so much, Jeremy. I appreciate you supporting the show. I just got to say, yeah, read that opinion piece. Go read that opinion piece and tell me what your thoughts are. Send me an email. I'm so amazed that this is the mentality and the attitude that they just can't fathom the fact that somebody would want to stop the government spend on that. Anyway, I need a Chris Story moment. I might have to go call Chris after the show. I will be back with you tomorrow. I appreciate you guys coming on board and joining us. Yes, even you, Harold. As entertaining as that might be sometimes. Here we go. We're going to be out of here. Go dress up. I'm all dressed up as a grumpy old man today. How'd I do? Grumpy old, those damn kids. Who's going to tell you whippersnappers and spending all the money? There you go. All right, my friends, we will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.
Goodbye.